All right, here we go. Welcome to the Joint Standing Committee for the Environment and Natural Resources. Today is Monday, March 1st, and like a lion, March. We're assembled electronically today for the purposes of inviting public comment on legislation. Before we get started, I just want to share a few bits of information related to the fact that this meeting is being conducted electronically. It's currently being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. This means anyone who's a participant in the meeting via Zoom can be seen and also heard if their microphone is unmuted. People on the Zoom meeting waiting to testify cannot be seen or heard until they are called to speak. This meeting will be recorded and is available to view on this channel soon after the meeting is concluded. In a moment, I will have committee members introduce themselves, but before I do, I will ask committee members to keep their mic muted until I call on you. If the name on your Zoom square is not the name you use to register to testify, it may be hard for us to identify you. For example, if you are registered as John Smith and your Zoom screen says iPhone 6 or Dad's laptop, it may take extra effort to get you into our virtual committee room. Please be patient. You should also know that it may momentarily appear as though you have been dropped from the meeting when we call you up to speak. It takes a second or two, but rest assured you will reappear and then you will be able to provide us with your testimony. So let's go ahead and do our morning introductions. Representative Bell, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Arthur Bell, House District 47, Yarmouth, Chebeak, and Long Island. Good morning.
Representative Ziegler.
Good morning, I represent District 96, the 7 towns of Belmont, Liberty, Lincolnville, Mountville, Morrill, Palermo, and Searsmont, all in Waldo County.
Representative Dudera.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vicki Dudera. I represent House District 94, the towns of Camden, Rockport, and the island of Islesboro.
Representative Gramlich.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. I am Lori Gramlich, and I represent Old Orchard Beach, which is House District 13. I am having connectivity issues, so I may need to take my camera off. But thank you. Nice to be here.
Representative Bloom.
Good morning. I'm Lydia Bloom. I represent House District 3 in York.
And Representative O'Connor.
Good morning. I am Beth O'Connor. I represent the individuals of House District 5, which is Berwick and part of North Berwick.
And Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm Rick Bennett. I have the honor of serving 13 towns in Western Maine in the beautiful lakes region and the foothills. Thank you.
And my co-chair, Representative Tucker.
Good morning. My name is Ralph Tucker. I'm a state representative from Brunswick, and that's House District 50. Thank you.
And we're also joined by Deirdre Snyder, our analyst from OPLA, and also by Sabrina Carey, who's our clerk, and we're grateful to them for their help keeping us organized and on track. So thank you both. And this meeting format is new to all of us, and we expect that there will be unforeseen glitches and mistakes, so please be patient. We're doing our best, and we will all learn as we go along and hopefully improve along the way. Thank you. One note about the chat function, we will just be using it for logistics, but not for any substantive conversation related to any of the legislation that we are considering. And actually, before we go any further, Representative Hanley has arrived, so we'll take a minute to let him introduce himself before we continue any further. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jeff Hanley. I represent District 87, which is with Gardner, Pittston, Randolph, Westcasset, and Alna. I apologize for being late. I had a computer collapse on me, so here I'm back though.
And looks like I maybe forgot to introduce myself. I'm Stacy Brenner. I'm the senator from District 30. I represent most of Scarborough, all of Gorham, and part of Buxton. And so for today, we have 3 public hearings planned. What will happen is I will hear first from those that are speaking for the bill, and then those that are speaking against the bill, and those that are neither for nor against. And we are going to start with, let's see. We're going to start with LD 67, then we'll hear LD 69, and then we'll hear LD 436 last. I believe the department is here to introduce LD 67, and that is Mr. Kavanaugh. And if you are here to speak in favor of LD 67 and you're in the waiting room, I will have you raise your electronic hand, and then we will know to call on you next.
Excuse me. I believe that Representative Danny Martin may be the one who is presenting this on behalf of the department.
Excellent.
And I noticed that he's on the.
I see him there. Yes. So let's bring in Representative Martin first. And Mr. Kavanaugh, will have you just hang in the wings right there and maybe turn your screen off for a minute. Thank you, Representative Tucker. Welcome, Representative Martin. Mr. Representative Martin, you are on mute. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now we can see you. You're still on mute. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, Representative Tucker is correct. It's usually the procedure where the sponsor of the bill is allowed to sponsor the bill, so I apologize. Good morning, folks. Senator Brennan, Representative Tucker, and members of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. My name is Danny Martin. I'm a state representative, and I represent House District 150, located in northern Aroostook County. It really pleases me this morning on behalf of the department to present to you LD 67, an act to assist in the restoration of Atlantic salmon. This bill, as I'm sure you know, repeals and amends sections 465 of Title 38, and it eliminates restrictions for the total number of discharge licenses allowed to be issued to Class AA and Class A waters. It also retains the requirement in current law that those discharges assist in the restoration of Atlantic salmon, returns to the waters to a state that is closer to historically natural chemical quality. I thank you this morning for listening and will attempt to answer any questions you may have. However, I gather and assume that the department will be testifying, as is the case that this bill was in fact submitted by the department, and I was pleased to be asked to sponsor the bill. Again, I'll attempt to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Representative Martin, and I look forward to when we are together and can say hi in person.
Thank you.
Any questions for Representative Martin? All right, how about we go ahead and move forward with Mr. Kavanaugh. Welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes. Thank
Great.
you.
Senator Brenner, Representative Tucker, members of the committee. I'm Brian Kavanaugh. I'm the Director for the Bureau of Water Quality at the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm speaking in support of LD 67. LD 67 will strengthen efforts to restore Atlantic salmon through water quality restoration in down east waters. Tributary streams provide important rearing habitat for cold water fish, including salmon. However, in some streams, conditions are unfavorable for aquatic life due to low pH. While the Clean Air Act has reduced the acidity of precipitation in eastern Maine detrimental impacts from acid rain are still observed due to the shallow soils and low buffering capacity of the underlying bedrock in the region. Most waters in eastern Maine periodically experience acidic conditions with a pH less than 6.5. This low pH creates conditions that are unfavorable to Atlantic salmon. For many years, the department has licensed and participated in the liming of acidic waters through the addition of clamshells as a restoration action for Atlantic salmon. The goal of these projects is to provide for acid mitigation through the addition of calcium as the shells break down. Currently, the department is partnering with the Downey Salmon Federation on such a project, and we are monitoring the effects of the clamshells on water quality and aquatic life. The addition of the liming agents, including clamshells, is an activity that requires a discharge license from the department. LD 67 eliminates certain licensing restrictions that were put in place many years ago when this type of activity was less well known than it is now. The department no longer believes that these licensing restrictions are necessary and would in fact be a hindrance to future projects. Given the way the bill is drafted, it may be hard to understand what is being changed, so I'll briefly describe what the bill does. Sections 1 and 3 of the bill strike language that limits the number of times the department may issue this type of license to Class AA and Class A waters. The current limit is 3 times. The result of this change is that the department would be able to provide or approve licenses for future projects as long as we find that the remaining requirements of law are met. Sections 2 and 4 of the bill strike language that limits the term of these licenses to 5 years. This language is redundant in that all discharge licenses are limited to a term of 5 years by 38 MRS section 414.2. For additional information, I've attached to my testimony a short progress report on an ongoing project that suggests that water quality has improved due to the addition of the shells. In closing, enactment of LD 67 will enable the department to continue to license these beneficial water quality projects that support the restoration of Atlantic salmon. I ask your support of LD 67, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have now or at the work session. Thank you.
Representative Bloom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. So for which rivers do you see having this benefiting most, or this rule will benefit which river restorations most?
It's mainly an issue down in the Down East rivers. There's a series of rivers that are identified as for the distinct population segment, the Gulf of Maine distinct population segment for endangered Atlantic salmon. Right now, there's a project that we have on Richardson Brook, but in the future, it could be really any of those streams in that Down East watershed that are habitat for Atlantic salmon. And we really leave it to the project partners like the Salmon Federation, Department of Marine Resources, those folks that are working hard on the recovery of the salmon. They would identify the most appropriate water bodies.
Thank you.
Representative Tucker.
Good morning, Mr. Kavanaugh.
Good morning.
My question is just out of curiosity. In the statute at issue here, it says, it talks about when discharged effluent is for the purpose of and will assist in restoration of Atlantic salmon. And so I was wondering what type of effluents assist the restoration. I kind of was under the assumption that you don't want effluents, that the lack of effluents helps the fish. But the statute seems to contemplate that there are some discharges that help the fish. So could you explain that?
Yeah, I think effluent is probably not the best term to use. Here we're talking about specifically the addition of of natural liming agents like clamshells. Technically, any discharge to waters of the state requires a license from the department, even a discharge of a beneficial substance like clamshells to increase the pH for salmon habitat. So I think effluent's probably misleading. I know that's I guess I would read that in a very broad sense of anything that's discharged to waters of the state. In this case, it would be limited to something like clamshells that would be beneficial.
Thank you very much.
Representative Hanley.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Kavanaugh.
Good morning.
And thank you for your statements. Very interesting. The low pH level in these streams and waterways we're talking about, this is a natural occurring pH level. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually a carryover from impacts from acid rain. And the Clean Air Act has helped reduce the impacts of acid rain. Down east, the soil conditions and the geologic conditions don't really provide much buffering capacity. So we're still seeing the effects from acid rain in base flow from groundwater that has a lower pH, just because the soils haven't really been able to adjust that. So it's not really historical, it's impacts from society through acid rain. And this is these projects are designed to bring the pH back up to a level that's more representative of historic levels. So restoring it to natural conditions, that's the intent of these projects.
Follow up, if I may, Madam Chair. A follow up, if I may. Yes, okay, thank you. So, I mean, we are artificially influencing the pH level in a natural stream. And is there any indication of how long we can keep this type of man-made activity up before we, I mean, are there any measured results? Are we seeing if salmon, is this to protect the salmon themselves or a food source that they need? What is the overall, and how long can we continue to do this type of behavior?
Sure. So the benefits would be twofold. By returning the pH to a more natural level, that may provide a better environment for a variety of organisms, particularly insects, macroinvertebrates that we monitor for, that would be a food source for salmon, and also just for the salmon themselves. It's a better environment for them, for their growth and survival. And so there's those benefits. And we have seen, and there's a summary attached to the testimony, we have seen early indications of an increase in pH, and that's what we're going for, is to try to provide a more natural environment. In terms of how long this can go on, I think that's an unanswered question. It really relies on the project partners that are doing these projects. I would say we're really potentially in the early stages if this is proven to be beneficial. And one more thing that we can do to help in the restoration of salmon, I expect this could continue on into the future. And that's what this bill is designed to do. Back when the original statute was written to provide this exemption for these types of waters, it was a new type of project. It was really unknown. And so I think there was some conservatism built into the statute to limit it. And now we've seen, after 2 projects so far, that there does seem to be some benefit here, and we think it's appropriate to remove those restrictions so we can continue this forward with all the safeguards that are in place. We issue a license that has a variety of conditions in it for monitoring. This is really an experiment of sorts and a research project, so all those conditions are built into the license, and the addition of the clamshells is done very carefully through clamshells that have been composted and are clean, and that they're placed by hand in a very controlled manner to prevent any potential negative impacts.
Yes. If I may, one more statement question.
Sure.
So
Yes.
Does this program have an actual lifespan? I mean, is there an end date established? And my mother grew up in Dennisville, Denny's River, and the saying was you could just, if you scraped off the soil, you had a gravel pit immediately underneath. You never had to put gravel anywhere. So I know what you're dealing with. Thank you for your statements.
Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still trying to get my head around how we have environmental protection laws, and by reducing the number of licenses or increasing the number of licenses for an effluent, how that helps. And I heard your answer to Representative Tucker. Could you give me a better sense of who these licensees are and what, I mean, how many of these do you envision if 3 is too few?
Sure. So the current permittee is Downey Salmon Federation, and I believe they may be testifying today. I'm not sure, but I think you'll probably hear from some of the project partners. So Downey Salmon Federation is the current licensee. In the past, we licensed Project Share, which is an organization that helps in the restoration of salmon. I could envision, those types of entities continuing on, potentially our own Department of Marine Resources or the federal agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Any of those organizations that are involved in the restoration of salmon are potentially applicants. And the unique thing about removing this restriction, there's no other discharge license or type of license that we issue that has this restriction that we could only issue a certain amount of licenses. And again, I think that was put in place initially, it was back in 2004, I believe, when the first statute went into effect. It carved out this exemption because it was new and somewhat experimental. I think we were conservative in terms of putting these boundaries on it. And now that we have some experience with it and it seems beneficial, we feel it's appropriate to remove that and treat this like any other license that we issue. As long as we can make the findings that water quality standards will be attained, it's something that we can issue along with all the appropriate conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Kavanaugh? Not seeing any. I will turn to our attendee space and ask if there's anyone else to speak in favor of LD 67 to raise their hands. Great. Mr. Shaw, we will move you in. And just one quick announcement for anyone in the attendee space who's here to testify for LD 436. It was scheduled as a procedural requirement, but was submitted in error, and the committee will go into work session after the public hearing to entertain a vote ought not to pass, so that you are aware of the plan. Welcome, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw, when you're able, you'll want to turn on your screen and unmute yourself. Mr. Shaw, are you with us there? Mr. Shaw. Okay, I believe Mr. Shaw has submitted written.
I think,
here he is. Wonderful.
Yes, sorry. For some reason, everything went blank momentarily.
That happens when you get transferred into the committee room, Zoom committee room.
Well, good morning, committee members, and thank you for your service to the state of Maine. I'm Dwayne Shaw, Executive Director of the Downey Salmon Federation, and just want to acknowledge that the the information provided by Mr. Kavanaugh was very helpful in setting the sort of framework of what we're doing in partnership with the state and other with the state of Maine DEP, DMR, and other federal agencies as well toward the restoration of endangered Atlantic salmon in the Down East region. The organization that I work for is coming on to 40 years old next year. And some of the very first work we did in the early 80s was focused on what was then a new issue, and that was acid rain and acid precipitation. And over these 40 years, the research has led to the conclusions that we can in fact address this unnatural circumstance. As one of the questioners brought forward, is this a natural circumstance or is this a human caused problem that we can address? And fortunately, this can be addressed, and many of our partners, both in the US, in Canada, in Europe, and Scandinavia, have been doing this for many years. We've done work at a small scale, experimental scale, both in the laboratory and in the field with clamshells, in the laboratory with calcium, and shown that, in fact, the salmon recovery is being slowed as a result of the acidity that we're experiencing in these river systems. So what this will allow is for an enhanced public-private partnership to address this problem, very serious problem at a fairly large scale. And I point you to our sister organization, Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia Salmon Association has for over 10 years, it may be on toward 15 now, adopted a method used in Norway and brought it into Nova Scotia and used it extensively, and is seeing tremendous results with salmon numbers, young fish as well as adults then returning from the ocean. So we're excited to see DEP bring this legislation forward. It's very similar to legislation that was brought forward about 15 years ago, which allowed for large wood to be put into rivers. At one time, you may recall, we didn't want trees placed in rivers because people were leaving things in the streams that they probably shouldn't have. And what we've found is that by placing large trees, it can improve the habitat to a more natural state. So this is similar to that. So our organization is standing ready and in doing the research necessary to set the stage for fundraising that would support this going forward at a significant scale. And I say similar to what you might see in Nova Scotia, Norway, and other places. The one stream, and Representative Bloom had asked us which streams are we talking about, with the eastern coastal watersheds of Hancock and Washington County primarily, and one is particularly notable, and that's Tunk Stream, which starts near Tunk Mountain, Tunk Lake, and ends at Tidewater in town of Steuben. It's particularly acidic, particularly shallow soils, granitic outcroppings everywhere, low buffering, and extinction of the wild run of salmon in that system has happened during the 40-year period, which I've been involved with this work. So we've seen the demise of fish, which with a direct smoking gun, back to this particular issue in part. So we're looking very closely at Tunk Stream as one place where we might do this work. We're involved now in the East Machias, which is Richardson Brook that had been noted, and there are a number of other places we've been looking closely at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shaw. Representative Tucker has a question.
Mr. Shaw, welcome.
Thank you.
My question is twofold. First of all, is the depositing of clamshells and other base type substances something that's being done by the government or by private entities such as your association? And secondly, will this process have to continue as long as there is acid rain? In other words, is this going to be an indefinite job to keep balancing the pH in the smaller streams?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes, well, first, the permit that's issued is an experimental permit that DESF, Downey Salmon Federation, holds. But everything that we're doing, because we're working with an endangered species and designated critical habitat under the Clean Water Act provisions that are controlled by Maine DEP and EPA, are done in partnership. So we're working hand in hand with the agencies, and that is the same thing that's happening in Nova Scotia, for instance. And to address the question about how long might we have to do this, I can stewardship and recovery stewardship is forever, of course. Recovery for a base cation like this could take a very long time. However, we are fortunately in a situation where we have an industry that is producing the product we need, clamshells, and in fact, it's a byproduct that they have to pay to dispose of. So we found a win-win solution for the disposal of clamshells back into the natural waters where they can be a solution and go into solution, actually. So yes, these in Norway, for instance, ongoing liming work has been conducted for roughly 40 years. They are now fishing rivers very productively in terms of tourism and so on, in some 18 rivers, I believe, that are being limed there. However, the recovery over time is incremental. So the soils will provide a buffering capacity and the bedrock will give some, but there's a long delay time. So with the Clean Air Act and its amendments, it's allowed for much cleaner air. So we're not going in the wrong direction. We're going in the right direction with what's deposited on the landscape with precipitation. So that's allowing the soils to start to recover. Land use is also changing, and extensive clear cutting and so on had also a negative implication on the water chemistry. So with the limitations in clear cutting and aggressive forestry, that is also helping to recover the soil chemistry to a more natural state.
Thank you very much.
Representative Bloom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Shaw. Nice to hear your voice again. And since this bill is about to assist the restoration of Atlantic salmon, I thought I would like to ask you, how is the restoration of Atlantic salmon going through the work that you're doing in East Machias?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Representative Bloom, and it's good to see you. My connection is not great, so I'm sticking with just the voice here, but things are going well. In fact, we've had some breakthroughs, and again, we're learning some lessons from abroad. The methods of putting fish into the East Machias River, for instance, where we're also doing the clamshell work, very intensive examination of the whole system, is showing really tremendous results. So the agencies who we've worked closely with have now completely revised the methods by which their stocking will proceed, such that they are working in partnership with the Downey Salmon Federation. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just issued a new Section 10 permit to us under the Endangered Species Act. So we, as a non-governmental organization, are holding, raising, and releasing, and paying for, I should say, a lot of the effort that's underway. And the methods that we're using, adapted out of Scotland and England, are proving to work quite well. So I welcome anyone to come down, take a look at our website, see what we're doing, and see that there is hope for the Atlantic salmon. And I will take the opportunity to say we have to look elsewhere and see that restoration can happen for the species. In England, they're fishing rivers that were completely depauperate of salmon. In Norway, same thing. Denmark, same thing. Nova Scotia, same thing. So it can be done, and together in these public-private partnerships, we can turn this around.
Mr. Shaw, I have a question. This is Senator Brenner. I'm wondering if there are agricultural activities that contribute to the acidification of these streams and waterways.
There is a bit of that. It's not been documented very much, and the buffers around the agricultural work help tremendously. So we're working with ag producers to buffer. So in Maine, you may be aware that forestry is considered agriculture by the USDA. So I had mentioned forestry already. Blueberries, cranberries are both acid-loving plants. That's why they're here on these very somewhat acidic soils. So adding additional acids could potentially contribute to increased acidity. However, with the buffer methods that are in place, we don't believe we're seeing an impact from that. There could be a very small impact in some places, but generally speaking, no.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Shaw? All right, not seeing any, and since we're not in person to have any bagels with lox, I guess we will move on to those that are in opposition to the bill we are speaking about, LD 67. If there's anyone in the attendee space who is here to speak in opposition. I'm not seeing any hands go up. Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against the bill? And I'm not seeing any hands go up. So at this time, we will close our public hearing on LD 67, and a work session will be scheduled shortly, probably next week. All right, thank you so much. I believe LD 69 is sponsored by our own Representative Tucker, so we will go ahead and open the hearing for LD 69.
Thank you very much. LD 69 is an act to reduce duplicative permitting review for projects under the site location of development laws. I would like to note at this point that I will be presenting this. I am not the sponsor. The sponsor is the Department of Environmental Protection. In all of these bills today, the legislators who are presenting them are called presenters, although our computer system calls us sponsors incorrectly. The reason I bring this up is an interesting twist on our committee rules, which places on sponsors the obligation to keep their mouths shut during the hearing and not ask questions of other witnesses. The rule also says that if you testify in favor of a bill or against the bill, you also are muzzled unless the chairman says otherwise. So I want to present this bill as a presenter and not a sponsor. And I'm going to turn this, the details of explaining the bill over to Mr. Livesay from the DEP, who is the person who oversees the Land Bureau. And he will explain to us what the site location of development law is and how this would change it. The only thing I would point out is the happy coincidence here that this is one of my favorite types of bills because it simply deletes two integers. It reduces the statutory load of the main code by one integer. It strikes out a 7 and adds 10. So well, wait a second, it just adds one integer to the entire corpus of our statute. And I like that kind of law. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Representative Tucker? Not seeing any, we will move on to hear from Mr. Livesay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. I think I clicked all the right buttons to make myself visible, and hopefully you can hear me. Senator Brenner, Representative Tucker, committee members, I'm Nick Livesay, Director of the Bureau of Land Resources within the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm here today to speak in support of LD 69. The department processes thousands of permit applications a year, and roughly 200 of these are site law permits. That's short for site location of development law. Site law focuses on larger projects, those defined in laws involving development of state or regional significance. And the most common characteristic that qualifies a project for review under site law is that the development is a structure. And this is a term that's uniquely defined in site law, so you can put aside what you think you know about what constitutes a structure and what doesn't, and read on in site law. The term structure refers to an area greater than 3 acres that is proposed to be stripped or graded and not revegetated within the calendar year. And that's sort of kind of complicated, but effectively what this boils down to is impervious area. Subsequent modification and development permitted under site law, unless otherwise exempt in statute, requires modification of the original permit. So once you have a site law permit, further development activity at that location requires some sort of a modification. Many municipalities review the same development under local ordinances. The legislature has recognized that some of these municipalities are equipped to review site law size development proposals, and that additional duplicative review by the department is unnecessary. These municipalities fall into 2 categories. The first is those that have sought and obtained delegated authority. And they do this after demonstrating that they have certain qualifications and adequate resources. The second category involves municipal capacity. So those are municipalities that have demonstrated by establishing designated growth areas in their municipality through their comprehensive plan and adopted statutorily required ordinances, obtained state approval of their comprehensive plan and ordinances, and shown again that they possess the resources to implement these ordinances. So these are municipalities that have capacity. The 2, delegated authority and capacity, they function largely the same way, but they're a bit different. So LD 69 increases the size of development proposals for which duplicative department review and permitting would not be required, from 7 to 10 acres. And this is of a structure, so that definition that we talked about earlier. Any potential impacts to protected natural resources, so these are things like wetlands or significant wildlife habitat, would continue to be reviewed by the department under the Natural Resources Protection Act, or NERPA. And stormwater would also continue to be reviewed unless the town had separately obtained delegated authority for stormwater review. So while the total number of projects that would benefit from the change proposed in this bill is relatively small, the department believes this change would promote a more efficient environmental review process for those projects without environmental sacrifice. The department is consistently under pressure to process permits faster and asked to search for ways to do more with less. Where process improvements can be made, even if incremental, while fulfilling our responsibility to protect Maine's environment, we support the changes. Therefore, we support LD 69. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Dudera.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Livesey, for your, I had to find your name here. I had to move my Zoom around. So as I understand it, some of this towns are already doing. The towns that are equipped to do this, that have a code enforcement officer, have the correct people in place, are already doing this. So we're just eliminating some of that. And although you said right now it's a small amount, I am just curious how much you guess that this would free up time for the department.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I included, I don't know how it works in this electronic age, but I did include in the testimony that I submitted on the portal a list of those towns, or I should say municipalities, many are cities, that have both delegated authority and capacity. So you can get a sense of the numbers that we're talking about and the places, and the number are fairly few, and not surprisingly, they're the larger communities. Presently, I looked at some data from prior years, and under the present system, it ranges from like 10 to 20, and probably on a typical year, closer to 20 projects that towns with delegated capacity, so that, or delegated authority, I should say, not counting the capacity towns, but the delegated authority towns review. And so you can sort of extrapolate from there how many projects are reviewed under capacity. And the reason I'm distinguishing between those data sets is that for delegated authority, we get a copy of those applications, so we can easily track the delegated authority projects. If a town has capacity, the review is it's a little bit different. It's actually exempt from site law. That's the difference primarily between delegated authority and capacity. Capacity is an exemption, and delegated authority is just that. It's sort of the town through its ordinances applying effectively the same review as would be under site law. So there's not a tremendous amount of projects that fall into this category, but more than 20 or 30, probably in a typical year. And then the question becomes, okay, how many additional projects, if by moving from 7 to 10 acres, would we be capturing? And what's the economy there, or the benefit there, and what are the cons, right? That's kind of what we're trying to balance. And my best guess is that there would be some years where there would be no projects that would benefit from this change, and that there might be others where there would be 3 or so projects. I think the number would be small. And so what type of projects are we talking about? And are there some other advantages beyond just the transfer? And I think that there are. So the types of projects, the transportation facility in Portland, where the bus facility is, that's sort of a scale that we'd be talking about. And I think that you're going to find that you're not going to get over the 7-acre threshold without some sizable parking. If you're thinking about impervious area, it's unlikely that you're going to have 7 acres of traditional structure, building. That would be a really large facility. And I think the other types of areas where you'd see this come into play would be with sort of urban infill or urban renewal projects. So you're taking previously developed mill buildings and downtowns and whatnot. So you've got a pretty big impervious area already. Those buildings could be old enough that they predate site law, so there's no existing permit that would be amended, and so you're sort of almost starting over a little bit with your count, depending on how you reuse buildings. So I think those, sort of the urban infill example, I think is the most likely. I don't think it's all that likely that we would see a 7-acre greenfield development. That would be it takes a lot of work to get up to 7 acres in terms of impervious area. And one of the other benefits, I think, is just that there's a bit of back and forth that goes on between the department and these municipalities, both as part of the review, and that would continue, but there's also just sort of the administrative paperwork that goes on, if you will, or email work when we're up around these thresholds, and some of that could be cut out if, rather than having to go back and forth with the community about, yes, you're going to take it, they could just, the presumption would be that they are doing it right from the get-go.
Senator Brenner, can I just follow up quickly? So I'm curious, looking at your list, the towns at the bottom, the towns and cities at the bottom who no longer have the capacity or the delegation, and did they lose a key person? Is that, I'm just curious, just quickly why?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at the list so that you're talking about Augusta, Belfast, Wyndham, and Yarmouth. And I don't know the particulars of any other than I know with Wyndham, I don't believe that was a voluntary sort of surrender of delegated authority on the part of Wyndham. I think it was a product of a determination by the department that it worked better for the department to review projects there than Wyndham. And with regard to Augusta and Yarmouth and Belfast, it may be that they just decided they rather defer. They'd opted in and now they want to opt out, if you will. In Wyndham, I don't know the particulars. I don't want to be critical, but they have some real permitting challenges over there, not from an administrative perspective, but they've got a lot of development, and they actually don't have public sewer and water. And so you think of Wyndham Center and all the development that's there. It's a real challenge to figure out how to do that and do that responsibly. So it's a challenge for us, and my guess is it was also a challenge for them.
Representative Gramlich.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. My connection has been really spotty, so this might have been answered. And if I lose connection, I'll just submit something in writing to the chairs so I can get the question answered. But Mr. Lifesay, thank you very much. I'm curious in terms of when the municipality is going to have this kind of jurisdiction in lieu of a site review, what kind of appeal process would there be if there were folks that perhaps had land that abutted the particular site that wanted to follow a process? Would they go through their municipality, or would that get elevated through the department?
They would go through their municipality. So as part of obtaining delegated review authority or satisfying their criteria for capacity, towns have to have ordinances in place that apply and involve standards that are sort of comparable in terms of achieving the same environmental outcomes. And so there's the planning board process there. And part of that process involves public notice, the opportunity to address your planning board. And then if you don't like the planning board outcome, typically you'd appeal to the Board of Appeals, and then from there you can appeal to court. And it's a very similar appeal process if compared to appealing a state agency decision. But it wouldn't be like appealing to the DEP, if you will.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Livesay? All right, thank you so much. I'm not seeing any.
Thank you.
Time this morning. Are there any other folks in the attendee space wishing to speak in favor of this bill, LD 69? I'm not seeing any. hands going up. Are there any attendees wishing, whoops, there's anybody wishing to speak in opposition to this bill? And anybody here to speak neither for nor against? Wonderful. Ms. Graham, we will move you into the space to offer testimony. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Senator Brenner and Representative Tucker and distinguished members of the Environment and Natural Resource Committee. I apologize, I got a little trigger happy on the hand piece. And my name is Rebecca Graham, and I am representing Maine Municipal Association, who has taken the position neither for nor against this particular piece of legislation on behalf of our 70-member Legislative Policy Committee, mostly to try to convey a message that we think this particular piece of legislation is responding to. It's a symptom of a larger problem that we'd really like the committee to consider as it continues forward with its legislative review, because this won't be the first time that you will see legislation come before you addressing a symptom of a larger problem, and that remains the lack of funding for staffing and adequate resources that are dedicated from all-in revenue sources for the department. Local leaders are asking that you carefully consider the drivers of all the legislation that comes before you, particularly as it pertains to LD 69 and even LD 67 previously. And ask you to consider what underlies each legislative request. Over time, many department functions have been shifted to the local level with either new or growing permit obligations. And these shifts occur because the department does not have enough staffing resources available to support the decisions that are made here in this committee. And for the past 10 years, those decisions have rarely received as much of a moral imperative discussion at the appropriations table as they tend to within the committee. So while the bill is relatively small in its impacts, many of the communities which do desire or have the ability to review development, it's also deeply important to recognize that there is a vital reason for duplicative review. The symptom of a slow permit response is a direct result of that chronic underinvestment. And this approach not only increases the burden on local governments who are essentially forced to create micro environmental protection departments due to their over-reliance on department permits to address and collect statewide data on our health of our systems, it also structurally underfunds the protection activities statewide. It's imperative for the permittee to meet their obligations, while further upstream, often there's no restrictions, or worse, permits are used as a system of allowable degradation. Environmental protection that's funded through that most regressive property tax system collects piecemeal data on a municipal level that's often harmful because it limits the view rather than a whole systems review, which the department could do if it had adequate staffing and was taking on a number of these functions, particularly within public education of watersheds. I think probably the last key takeaway is that we would really like you to think about ways in which you can support what we've started over the summer, which is to try to reset the municipal state relationship with the department. We really need to be more symbiotic partners and to carry out a lot of these functions. And as the Climate Council recommendations are rolling forward, there are a number of rule reviews that municipal officials and municipal staff are going to play key roles because they understand how they function at the local level and where they're seeing the needs for improvement. And we need the DEP to have enough staffing to be able to actually address and do that review in a sensible, thoughtful way. And we need to have a whole systems approach on all these systems rather than municipal boundary approach, particularly in terms of watershed, which impervious surface tends to impact significantly. And there are additional details that I've provided in my written testimony, but about some of the impacts on the communities, even though it is very limited. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Are there any questions? Yes, Ms. Giudera, Representative Giudera.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairwoman. Ms. Graham, have you got any instances for us where you have seen this potentially be a problem with certain municipalities, or any projects that to just put a concrete face on it?
Well, not specific projects, but there are a number of communities that were concerned that the increase, particularly in Portland, that the increase in that acreage threshold might actually kind of leave them on the hook. They kind of count on DEP to be there to assist. They think it might make it harder for them to come into compliance with their own federal permits for MS4, but also sends mixed messages to the contracting community as well. I think I put within my testimony a specific quote that they had. The duplicative review piece is also really important in communities that have MS4 permit obligations, because unlike the rest of New England, we have duplicative review of our site law built in currently. And that was something that I think was a challenge for a lot of those communities during this permit to convey to EPA. It's not usual that there is that duplicative review. So they are creating these systems when they're in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, because they feel that they're vitally important in the protection of natural resource that are impacted by the MS4s, the discharges to those urban impaired waters. So Portland was really concerned that they might lose that vital partnership. They have the ability to ask for the department review, but if the department doesn't have capacity to do that review, it's continuing the same. So making sure that they have that capacity is vitally important. And it may be, and it might not be under Mr. Livesey's direction, but it might be that at some point in time, the department determines that they don't have an obligation when asked by the municipality to help within that process. And that would be detrimental for municipalities, particularly in those federal permit situations.
Did you have a follow-up, Representative Dudera? Representative Bloom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Graham, for being here. I think it's really important to hear on the site law stuff from the municipality's perspective. And I agree with you about the additional staff. Have you been specific in what your municipalities need and how the DEP could improve their staffing to help accommodate? Have you been very specific in those requests? And are you going to show up at the budget hearing to say so?
Yes, actually the conversations this summer with the department on a number of different levels. There's an intersection between land and water bureau regulation that is felt at the municipal level, as well as marine resources. There's this mixture, like all permits end at the municipality. So there's a strong desire to have a municipal coordinator built within those entities so that they understand sometimes the conflicting regulation that municipalities are getting. So we talked about that. We talked about assistance and enforcement, because often using or relying on municipal budgets for legal fees to go after folks who are breaking environmental rules is kind of a David and Goliath situation. Whereas if there was a partnership with the Attorney General's office supported by the department, there's much stronger outcomes that are possible. And all of these folks have the end goal of protection in mind. And they're the ones that are delivering it, at least on the municipal level, and collecting a lot of the data that allows the state to meet its federal obligations under the Clean Water Act as well. So we were really looking for support in education, public education, messaging. A lot of that's happening basically in a regional way now with a lot of the MS4 communities, but they are whole watershed and really important whether or not you have a federal permit. And they're important department previously accomplished department public education campaigns as well.
Representative Tucker.
May I ask whether the Senator Brenner, whether you agree with my interpretation of sponsor versus presenter? And either way, would you allow me to ask some questions here?
Most definitely agree, and I would certainly entertain questions from you.
Thank you. Ms. Graham, you represent the Maine Municipal Association, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so you bring to us a position which is determined by the MMA. Do they have a committee that tells you what position to take?
Yes, we have a 70-member legislative committee, and those folks are elected by their community peers mirroring the 70 Senate districts in Maine. We have a meeting on a monthly basis, and then we also poll on a weekly basis on legislation.
And your membership must contain a full range of tiny little towns and major cities, correct?
Yes, this is correct.
If there is a town or a city which disagrees with the position taken by the MMA, are they still allowed to come before this committee and testify on legislation on their own, separate from the MMA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just to follow up, our conversations with the DEP this summer did involve tiny towns in northern Maine who were actually feeling a lot of stress by being asked by the department to enforce kind of permitting renewal fees that hadn't been collected from particular entities. So,
because I sensed in your presentation that there was maybe some different perspectives depending on whether small towns, big towns, in regard to how they would respond to this bill. But I just wanted to make sure that the towns were allowed to come forward separately if they want to. If they are unable to prevail in your policy committee, they are still free to come in and oppose or support if they want to, right?
Absolutely, and they frequently do. This particular legislation, I highlighted the 3 different commentaries. There are some folks that feel very strongly that they've got this under control, and bigger folks that I didn't expect that had some concerns about maybe the erosion of that partnership. But the theme was what we really wanted to hit, and the theme amongst all of our communities is that more and more department obligations are falling on them, either via permit requirements or new permits and created or increased permit fees that the department is being forced to rely on to fund its basic operations. And what we really need is that it be supported, because it's all in protection that we all need. And we also need those resources to be able to rely on the ground. And it's important for the department to understand that broad range municipal experience as well.
Thank you very much.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Graham, thanks for your testimony. There's a couple of lines in your testimony I wanted to ask you about and get some further clarification and examples or just your perspective on. You said that each permit created shifts data collection and protection activity away from a whole systems approach and onto a limited view approach. The imperative for the permittee is to meet their obligation while further upstream, no restrictions are required, or worse, permits are systems of allowable degradation. That's a pretty important line, and I was wondering if you could shed some further light on that. In particular, if you had any examples of where the permit process has become a system of allowable degradation.
Well, I mean, a permit is created to allow what is a discharge of known substance that is mixed in its chemistry into a water body. So in larger communities, for instance, they have to treat for chlorine or chloride that might be going into those water systems. In some cases, there's bacterial components. They have to find out where there are illegal discharges, and often they aren't within the municipal boundaries. They often are upstream sources, and then there's really nothing that they can do. But as it floats down or it gets assigned within that municipal boundary, it becomes that community's obligation to respond to that. I think probably you'll hear frequently like the fertilizer use and in communities. Some communities have restrictions on the use of that material within their communities. But that doesn't mean that that water body is improved any by that. It might not be inhibited, but other communities around them further upstream don't have any of those obligations and don't have any maybe of those ordinances either. And there isn't, necessarily a need for that either, but because of the permit at that municipal level downstream, they're required to do a significant amount of data collection about that particular water body and to mitigate for that, at least at their direct outflows. There's also some increased testing that we are aware we've been in conversation with the department about for phosphorus and other material that's going to create some new testing midstream for a lot of these communities that previously they haven't had to do. They've just been testing at the outflows and trying to follow those back to where they could possibly find any sort of source. Often it's a natural source.
If I could just follow up, are you suggesting though that there are some instances where the department, the state is actually treating municipalities differently with respect to these contaminants? Or are you saying that municipalities have different rules and that results in a different treatment?
Municipalities are on the hook for a variety of different permits and permit obligations, but not all municipalities are. So there is a disproportionate impact on a lot of historic industrial large communities to meet their clean water regulation issues. However, what's important about that whole process is that permitting in general is the narrow view that we are looking at protection activity. It's by the permittee, and that spans both corporate entities and large institutions, as well as municipalities. But it is largely the municipalities that have these permits. It's largely not private development that has these permits. Oftentimes what happens is at the local level, you will find stronger regulation through ordinance enacting to prevent a lot of that development from happening, or to change the material that is being released into those areas. And that's also a struggle sometimes, because communities put themselves in a position where they're the ones that have to enforce it. The department might be aware that this is an issue, but there's not exactly an ability for them to address that on a statewide level. I think salt, road salt, might be one of those chemicals that further on down the road, you'll see some sort of legislation about the use of road salt and its impact on a number of urban impaired streams.
Okay, this raises a lot of questions for me. I don't want to take the committee's time right now to further explore it, but it's an interesting subject, and I would like to explore it further. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Graham? Not seeing any. I will thank you so much for your time this morning. And we will ask if there are any other folks in the attendee space here to speak neither for nor against LD 69. I'm not seeing any. So at this time, I believe we are ready to close the public hearing on LD 69. And now we will move over to LD 436. And I think Representative Tucker, you and I will switch spaces, and I will present.
Very well.
436.
We now call into order the public hearing on the case of LD 436, an act regarding the authority of the Department of Environmental Protection regarding applications, permits, and fines. And this will be presented by Senator Stacey Brenner. So we recognize Senator Brenner.
I thank you so much, Representative Tucker. Now that everyone is awake, Representative Tucker and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on the Environment and Natural Resources. I am still Stacy Brenner, and I reside in Cumberland and represent Senate District 30. I'm here to present LD 436, an act regarding the authority of the Department of Environmental Protection regarding applications, permits, and fines. The proposed legislation was developed by the DEP through its experience in administering and enforcing the targeted statutes to ensure consistency, clarity, and corrections to statutes identified by the department. In proposing these changes, it was the intent of the department to more consistently enforce past due fees, more efficiently resolve enforcement matters, and provide further clarity and consistency to the statutes in which the department administers. Since submitting the bill language last fall, some additional solutions have been identified, and DEP staff is asking for more time to delve further into several components of the bill. Respectfully, the department is requesting that the committee move ought not to pass on this bill in order to give staff time to study the issues further. Commissioner Loisem is here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay. The committee recognizes Commissioner Loisem. Welcome back.
Good morning, Senator Brenner, Representative Tucker, distinguished members of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. I'm Melanie Loisem, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. This is my first time testifying to you through Zoom, and I will confirm it is a very disconcerting experience when you go into that transitional period. So thank you, Senator Brenner, for at the beginning of each of these, making note of that to your presenters, because I just experienced it myself. The department would also like to thank Senator Brenner for presenting the bill and respectfully requests that you vote ought not to pass for LD 436. The department compiled the provisions of this bill over the last couple of years as various questions and inconsistencies regarding statutory language have arisen while attempting to effectively resolve cases or questions of noncompliance. These proposed changes are not time sensitive and were compiled as a sort of enforcement omnibus bill. Since the department initiated the legislation in the fall of 2020, we've identified some other options as well as some other issues. Since the bill was printed, we've received a variety of helpful feedback and questions, both internally at the department and from stakeholders. So at this time, the department would like to continue that dialogue and work on other revisions before asking you to consider such changes. Fair and effective enforcement is a necessary component of environmental protection laws, and the department does plan to introduce new legislation in a future year. We do not recommend carrying this bill over because some changes may be more appropriately packaged with specific programs rather than in such an omnibus form. Thank you for your consideration of our request, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? I'm looking for the little hands. Senator Bennett.
I'm pointing at my little hand. Commissioner Loisem, I just really wanted just to take the opportunity to congratulate you publicly for your confirmation in your position. It's nice being able to call you Commissioner Loisem rather than that acting business. So congratulations.
Thank you, Senator. Isn't that so?
Other questions or comments or congratulations from the committee? Okay, I see some clapping over there in York County. Representative Dudera.
Well, I can never resist saying congratulations to somebody. So congratulations, Commissioner Loisem. It was really nice to hear that title this morning. And I'm sure I speak for all of us. We're very pleased and happy for you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that maybe your measures today on this bill will enable you to have one more that you will have voted on your tally. I know that that is important as well.
Yes, there are some of us who seem very, very concerned about meeting our statutory April 2 goal. Okay, very well. I'm addressing the attendees now. We have on our attendee list, we have Nick Livesay, Patrick Strock, and Rebecca Graham. Could Mr. Strock or Miss Graham put up their hand so I can see if they wish to testify? Does Mr. Strock or Ms. Graham wish to testify? Okay, I see no hands on my attendee list. Therefore, I see no reason why we should not terminate this public hearing on LD 436. Therefore, the hearing is now concluded.
Oops. Representative Hanley has a hand up.
Oh, thank you very much. Senator Hanley. Representative Hanley.
You gave me a demotion.
Promotion.
No.
You can wrestle that out with the senator if you want as to whether it's a promotion or a demotion.
Do we need to have a vote on this bill at all to do what the commissioner wishes?
Yes, we do.
Okay, do we need a motion?
Yes, I was going to recognize Senator Brenner, but
well, I'll let Senator Brenner
make the motion.
I think officially close our public hearing, and then we need to officially open a work session.
Right.
And then make a motion, and then y'all can put your yellow hands up and we'll be good.
Okay.
Actually, I think it has to be a
Do you
roll
want
call.
to say anything in the public hearing, Mr. Representative? Okay, therefore, the hearing is over. It's concluded. I'll now recognize Senator Brenner.
Thank you so much, Representative Tucker. I would like to make a motion that we vote ought not to pass on LD 436.
Do I hear a second?
Whoops, Representative O'Connor.
Thank you. We need to have the motion to go into work session first.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for
We need a
reminding
motion.
me. Okay.
Yes, I'd move that we go into work session.
Okay, very well.
Second.
It's seconded. Any opposition? All in favor of going into work session, just raise your hand. Okay, we're all going into work session. We are now in work session. Now I recognize Senator Brenner once again.
Thank you so much, Representative Tucker. I move that we vote ought not to pass on LD 436.
Second.
Seconded by Representative O'Connor. Any discussion? I'm looking for hands here. Since there is no discussion, we can proceed to a vote. Shall we do it by raising our hands, or do you want to do a roll call?
We have to do a roll call.
Okay, very well. We'll proceed with the roll call and ask if our clerk could read the roll, please.
Senator Brenner.
I vote yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hanley.
Yes.
Senator Carney. Absent. Representative Bell.
Yes.
Representative Dudera.
Yes.
Representative Gramlich.
Yes.
Representative Johansson.
Yes.
Representative O'Connor.
Yes.
Representative Toole. Absent. And Representative Ziegler.
Yes.
You missed me.
Representative Bloom.
Yes.
I apologize. So that's 11 yes, 2 absent.
Okay. Before we proceed any further, I don't think we saw Laurie Gramlich in the flesh. We just saw her picture. So if we want to be picky about it,
You
there
saw
she
me,
is.
and I was in the flesh, but
Okay.
now I'm going out. I don't have that.
Thanks. Does that, so was everybody seen and heard? Okay, good. We're all set. Then the ought not to pass motion has passed. I pass the gavel back to Senator Brenner.
Well, thank you so much. I believe that closes our work session today. And we are ready to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I have a statement, a question, if I may.
Of course, please.
I see that Daniel has put together a letter for us for the issue I brought up this morning about the department in future reports on waste disposal, coming up with an energy component. I don't know if you've had time to look at that letter. I've looked at it and I find it exactly what I wanted. So we'll need to talk about that, I suppose, later.
Okay. I have not had a chance to read it yet this morning, so perhaps we can put that into our queue for Wednesday's discussion, if that's okay. And that'll give everybody a chance to read it. Okay. Any other points of interest to touch base on before we adjourn? Not seeing any, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
All right. We'll see you all again on Wednesday. We'll start off with a public hearing about shoreland zoning, and then we have a work session on the plastic bag ban repeal. Thank you, everyone.